All right. So, hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk with 3 seasoned PR experts on the subject of public relations for startups. I'm talking some experts. I consider our company, Fanatics Media, experts on this. So, it's going to be a very good discussion. So let's get started. I'm your host, Mark Fidelman, managing partner of Fanatics Media, and very excited about the show today. As a reminder, we're about how-to content, not the fluff that you see out there. Please ask questions on the right with a /Q. Also, tweet out the blab on the left-hand side, if you wouldn't mind. Subscribe to our guests and give props when answering questions you like. And if you don't like them, you know what to do. Put them in the comments section. So our guest today is Lara Miller. She works with Fanatics Media and Evolve. Matt Villano, and I'll have Matt introduce himself, and Ed Zitiron. Zitiron, thank you very much.
Lining these up.
So if you don't mind, we'll start with Ed. And Ed, a few sentences about yourself before we get kicked off.
I am Ed Zitiron, run Easy PR, which has obviously got my name in it. San Francisco, Oakland, Portland, and Boston-based media relations firm. Big clients, small clients, all sorts of clients. Just go to the bloody website. I wrote a book called This Is How You Pitch. I wrote a second book called Fire Your Publicist that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with at this point. But I wrote an entire book and just didn't publish it, which should give you an idea of my personality, which is just sometimes you do things. I have a Twitter account, which is very bad. So enjoy.
All right, Ed, full of
joy, just joyous person.
Matt, let's go to you next.
Hey, I'm Matt Villano. I'm a full-time freelance writer. Been doing this for 18 and a half years. I cover a host of topics from travel and family travel to technology and business. I'm a regular contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine. I've written for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Wrote for about a decade for CIO Magazine. And I'm working with startups all the time. I estimate that I receive between 50 and 60 pitches, cold pitches every week. So I've got lots of fun stories to share about what works, what doesn't, and what makes me want to smash my head against the wall.
All right. Lara.
Hey, I'm Lara Miller. I own Lara Miller PR, and I work with Fanatics, like Mark said. I've been with Mark for about 2 years now as well. I've been a freelance publicist for 13 years now, and I'm really honored to be with Matt and Ed today. Ed, Ed and I agree on a lot of things, and Matt and I are buds, so I met Matt actually pitching him. So we can tell that story. But I've worked with celebrities, startups, tech companies, product, PR, kind of run the whole gamut.
Great. All right, let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start with Ed, Mr. Joy, and I'm going to.
I also forgot to mention one thing about me that's probably relevant. I still write. I write for Inc. and the Next Web. I've written one thing for USA Today. I'm looking to do more. I continue to write because I can't stop, because I wrote for about 7 years before public relations, which have been in for about 7 years. Anyway, Continue with the question. Sorry.
All right. So no problem, Ed. That's good to know. So Ed, when we write about, I'm glad you're a writer. I think we're all writers here. When we write about companies like Apple, Google, all the big tech name companies that are out there, and even the, companies outside of tech that have great brand recognition, what do startups have to do differently to get public relations, the benefits of public relations get put into the press when they don't have that recognition? What do they need to do differently than the big guys?
Here's the thing. Am I allowed to swear?
What's that?
Am I allowed to swear?
Go for it.
All right. You can't polish a turd. If something is truly shit, it's not going to get covered. Right, sometimes it will. Putting aside your Googles and your Apples, most startups, if they are boring, are just boring. That being said, if someone writes about that certain kind of boring, be it some very deep level enterprise, Matt, you work as CIO, you know what I'm kind of getting at there. then that is something that is interesting to them. Boring to some, interesting to them. Mostly what most startups fail to do, and what they should do, is read the bloody writer's work and send them a very short email saying, here's the interesting parts, here's what we do, here's when we're doing it. And that is something that is so critically missed and so commonly missed, as Matt can also probably attest to. And I still get pitched as well, by the way. I get probably about 50 to 100 myself a week. Very funny. I hate it. And I think that is so commonly missed by PR people. PR people think they need to put up this kind of saccharine front and being super happy and super joyous with everything, and everything is the most amazing thing ever. No, frankly, most journalists I've found respond quite well to it. This is this, this is that, this is that, this is why you should care. Okay, buy it. And if they say no, these PR people get all het up and mad. And I don't really know why they do that. Maybe they're just sad. I don't know.
Okay. That was funny, Matt. Ed, what about you, Matt? What do you recommend startups do differently to kind of get that kind of coverage that the big guys get?
Well, I think obviously the key is standing out, right? So there's a fine line between standing out for the right reasons and standing out for the wrong reasons. I am certainly open to Twitter pitches. I'm certainly open to pitches that maybe take a different form in either email in terms of an approach, or even direct mail if people are feeling like dinosaurs. But I think the bottom line is obviously going to be the message, and I certainly am not going to be able to say this as colorfully as Ed just did. But if the message is not compelling, no matter how you pitch it, the pitch is going to fall flat. And I think a big part of it is researching who you're pitching. Whether you're pitching me or Ed or Josh Quittner or whoever it might be. You don't want to just throw a bunch of crap out there and hope that somebody jumps on it. I, as someone who's got young kids, as someone who tends to cover some quirkier stuff, I'm going to react much more favorably if a pitch reveals that the person who sent it and written it has been to my website and taken even 2 minutes to learn a little bit more about me and the stuff that I cover, as opposed to someone who's obviously just cut and pasted my name into a form letter and hit send.
And to add something to that as well, I feel like there are just a ton of these crappy PR people, and they're out there. They're really out there. They are the scum of the earth, and it's most PR people. I would say 95% of them. They do this thing where they then pretend that they've read your stuff. And in my case, I don't take pitches. All right, maybe I take like 4, but I am in PR. I have a job, and I write on the side because I feel like it. And these people are like, well, are you interested? No, I'm not goddamn interested. Why are you talking to me? We have no reason. I'm Incision, the world's worst database. Frankly, that's not true. There's way worse. Bulldog Media Pro is terrible. Anyway, these people will bother you. And this is most PR people because they don't realize this is actually quite a mundane job, one that is not that sexy. And I feel like they want to feel like they're impressive or something. You're not impressive. I'm not impressed. They're not impressed. The media's not impressed. And so if you're going to sit there and waffle on about this client, then just don't bother. But more importantly, it's really obvious if someone isn't going to take a pitch. There are times when you can say, okay, this person might. 75% shot. But in many cases, you can go, nope, wrong. Straight up.
I want to add a couple things. Mark, you asked how a company can get covered like Google or Facebook or one of the big ones. The fact is that 99% of the time, they're not going to be. So you really need to pick your niches and focus on those. I've had so many clients say, they'll have a startup, which they think is life-changing. And in the scheme of things, it's not. And come to me and say, hey, we want to be covered. We want the cover of Entrepreneur. We want this. We want that. And I always, advise them, like, we need to start small. We need to start in your niche. If your niche likes it, then we can go from there. And there are some, there's some standout companies that will get the major coverage. But most of the time, it's stay in your niche.
Yeah.
But why is that, Lara? I mean, why can't these startups get the same kind of coverage that a Google, Apple, what have you?
Because
I mean,
it's just not a story. I mean, you look at some of these startups and they have, 3-4 people working on it, and they're working on an app, and they hire a PR person and they say, hey, we want to stand out of the million people that are in the app store. We want to do our PR, and we want to be covered, and it's just not, it's either not interesting enough. It's not going to happen.
Not to be a dick or nothing. I've had 2 people, app companies, where I've got them in TechCrunch and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's just one of those things where they're an alarm. It's rare that I have someone come along and say, I must have the cover of Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That's also a really specific ask. But usually it's someone I was on the phone with someone about 2 months ago who had a terrible app, and they were really confused that I kept saying, I don't want to work on this. I think they thought that just money would do enough.
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
which is adorable. I mean, we will all die with as much money as we have, and I don't think it carries over to the afterlife. If anyone in this chat can answer that, please let me know. But it's just
there's always going
a lot
to be
of crap.
stand-ups. I did PR for a thing called Starship Robots about a month and a half ago, and I got an exclusive on CNBC for them. That was our breakout thing, and it got covered in like 136 places. And it was a brand new product that had never been out before.
Yeah.
It's so rare that's going to happen though. Like usually you're going to be on, the whatever e-commerce times, like, oh, break this story for us. It's just,
it depends on the client as well.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, you need to vet them, and you need to have the context to do it.
Absolutely.
One thing I'll add here is, there's a fine line between thinking out of the box for pitching a journalist and being a wild pain in the ass. I can think back if you all want to name names, you can just go back and sort of look through my Twitter stream. But there was one particular company. I believe the company was based overseas, but this guy pitched me on Twitter. No problem. I clicked the link, took a look at the company, and evaluated it objectively, in my opinion. And after looking through the site and trying to talk to a couple of people about whether or not they'd heard about this company, I determined it was not going to be something I was going to cover. So I told the guy, and again, this is all on Twitter. You can go back and look.
Oh, I'm looking.
He wouldn't stop harassing me. And to me,
always feel free to send these people my way. I'll have fun.
I know some people who could take care of it too. But to me, I mean, that was the exact opposite of what he should have wanted to accomplish. And that's no different, in my opinion, by the way, from emailing a pitch and then having one of your minions follow up by phone 2 days later to make sure that I got the email.
Coincidentally, you also tweeted about what
I'm not interested or I didn't get the email. Either way, you're probably not going to turn that into a save by calling me.
I did actually find you tweeting about one of my clients' alt workstations, because you apparently know friends. You're apparently friends with one of my clients, Altwork.
So you guys are dumping clients on one another? Is that what?
No. I was complimenting. I noticed that he was just that he happened to, apropos of nothing, see a word story I placed. Just fun to see. Anyway,
Matt and I are friends. Matt and I met through PR. He was covering a client of mine, and we became friends. I will pitch Matt occasionally, once every couple of months. And I don't even call him, and we're friends. So when I hear that people are calling him and bothering him, it actually offends me and it bothers me. And please stop.
Cold calls are offensive.
Don't call. It's That's one thing that Ed and I are.
They are bordering on illegal.
Right, but I don't even call you Matt. I don't think I've ever called you ever about anything.
Yeah, we've talked maybe twice on the phone, but again, I'm open to a phone call if I'm expecting it, and if you've actually got something worth talking about.
Which isn't a cold
They
call.
don't know. They don't know if they've got something worth talking about, right? Because nobody said no to them.
Right.
One thing I recommend for all journalists, because I probably get 30 to 4 pitches a week as well. Not that I'm a journalist, but I do write out there, is to have a Google Voice number. And if they persisted in calling you with Google Voice, you could shut them down right just immediately. So
that's what I have.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the cures to, solving that particular issue. So I want to move to a different topic. we've got some startups, Lara, that we work with, a company called Zolt, that get great press. They're a startup. They're a funded startup. So there are ways for startups to get covered. So I wanted to go, and I wanted to start with Matt again. What ways have you seen startups get very creative in order to get covered by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, some of the tier ones that are out there?
Well, first of all, I think whether or not a startup gets covered is still a perfect storm needs to happen. And the storm really comprises three different things. Number one, again, the startup needs to have a good story. And that story doesn't necessarily need to be a legitimate story, but it has to be compelling enough to get a journalist and an editor on board to tell the story. So number one, it needs to have a good story. Number two, it needs to be timely. I just did a piece in Entrepreneur about biohacking, synthetic biology. 3 years ago, that industry was not baked enough to sell a piece on it. Well, right now it's super hot. So obviously that, so it needs to be a good story, needs to be timely. And of course, number three, it needs to stand out. I wish that there were some formula for, okay, well, this is exactly what you do to stand out, but it's going to be different every time. I got a pitch last week about a new toy product, a new doll product for toddlers. The name of the product was Poo and Pee, and they were dolls in the shape of a drop of urine with arms and legs and a pile of crap with arms and legs. And, I actually engaged with the publicist quite a bit and ended up writing about them really because it was just very unique. I mean, who does that? I mean, it was like, dolls based on the emojis there.
Was this an Onion article, or what were you writing for Onion?
No, I mean, it was sort of a lighthearted but legitimate reference on a blog post. But I engaged with the publicist, and I specifically said to her, I said, listen, be honest with me. Are you of the belief that any press is good press, or are you not really going to be too happy if I write something poking fun at this? And she was honest with me in return, and she said, I'd rather it not be poking fun, but obviously that's up to you. And I appreciated that repartee, and so as a result,
does that person come from this planet? No, seriously. I mean, these people who take on these crappy products. And they're like, well, I want only good press for the shit and piss company. Like, it's like, what are you thinking there? What kind of worthless human, no offense to that person, but what kind of worthless human is taking on these clients and then has the brain malfunction to say, well, I really just want to keep it positive? It's like, what is that?
You know what? I mean,
I apologize for saying they're worthless human.
No,
I'm sure they're lovely. I'm sure they're lovely people with great parents.
These dolls are apparently wildly popular in Sweden and in some countries in Europe. And so, again, there is a good story there. I just think that, for our sort of tightwad populace here in the US, there's a bit of a, sort of an ew gross kind of factor. But I think once you get beyond that, there is a legitimately good story there. And part of what makes the story so great is that for the US market, it's a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
And so, I mean, I actually think she did quite a good job of selling what I'm sure was a tough client.
Did she
if you flip the roles there, I wouldn't have wanted to be in her shoes, and I thought she handled me really, really, really deftly. So,
did she mail merge you?
What's that?
Did she mail merge you?
No. That is someone I like. I respect that person. I respect the toilet person who clear pitched you. I respect that.
It's really bad. I've had clients ask me if I do that. Like, clients know about mail merging, PR people, and just stop. Please stop.
Clients are not the ones pushing that. I'm sorry.
I know, but I've had potential clients ask me if I do that and go with me.
Oh, good.
I don't do that.
That means someone's listening.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, well, I mean, do you they'll say, do you spam journalists? Do you just, is it like a pitch farm where you sit there? And I'm like, no.
No, you need to go and speak to Spark PR, SSPR, Edelman.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll take care of you for that one.
No, but Mark, you asked what specific things startups need to do to get covered. I would say know your market in and out, and know events that are going on. For instance, I have a company I just started working with, or a brand new startup. It's a product company, and I'm already pitching them for Valentine's Day gift guides. Know what's going on, know what events are going to fit with your markets. And then you can always use, different resources. If your client likes to be, or if you like to be on radio, there's Radio Guest List, which has awesome opportunities in radio.
What's Radio Guest List?
It's just for radio shows.
What is it? Is it a product? Is it a website?
No, it's producers of radio shows. It's a website. Producers of radio shows go on it and post what they need. And something I've been using for years, and landed, probably, 1 out of every 4 pitches probably lands with a client on a show. So,
but isn't radio harder to convert? If they're into conversion. For awareness.
You look at Money Tips, our client, Mark, and they love radio. It's hard to convert that, but some clients absolutely love radio. I had a fantasy sports client that has done a ton of radio in fantasy sports. You're going to convert those people.
Fantasy,
can you guys hear me?
And I think sports
it depends on what. Yeah, of course. So it depends on the niche, but it's a great resource. ProfNet Queries is urgent queries that ProfNet puts out on Twitter, and they usually have about 20 a day that are listed. But keep an eye on those. Pitch yourself. If you're doing your PR yourself, you can always pitch yourself. There's nothing that says you have to hire a publicist and pay a publicist. But if you're going to do your PR yourself, you need to follow up. You need to follow up with journalists, and you need to get the job done. And you need to know that the journalists are doing you a favor. You're not doing them a favor.
It seems
so. That's the way I always approach it.
Can I interject one thing here and add that specifically, Mark, what reps can do? Go beyond the databases. Because for whatever reason, and Ed was trashing Cision or one of these databases earlier in the blab, for whatever reason, I'm in one of these databases as being Los Angeles based. And I live up in Northern California, about 500 miles from Beverly Hills. And I can't tell you how many times I get emails asking if I want to do a desk side when client X is going to be in LA. Just about an hour ago, I got invited to an event there on the Sunset Strip, for next week or something. And it's like,
you got to play that one. You got to be like, yeah, sure. Beverly Wilshire, first class.
And what's unfortunate is, immediately if you send me a note like that, I don't have a blacklist. Well, I guess I do sort of have a de facto blacklist. But if you send me that note, the next note you send me, I'm going to be much less inclined to actually open it, because I know that you've worked off bad information in the past. So just have your people, startups or whoever, have your people take the extra 45 seconds to do a Google search and actually connect the dots, because a lot of times these databases are wrong, and it ends up alienating someone that you probably don't want to alienate.
Nope.
Yeah. Let me add to that. I think the best startups that I've seen that have really gotten good press is, one, you're right, they got to have a good product. Let's face it. But I've even seen companies with bad products get good press. But it seems like the first thing they do is find a great, relevant journalist list. That's the first thing they do, is identify who those people are. They do the research. It's a lot of work. It's time intensive. But there are places that you can start, but then you really have to drill down to make sure they're the right journalists. The second thing is have a great story and a great pitch and make sure it's relevant to what that journalist talks about. Again, a lot of work, but your chances of getting that story told become a lot higher. And then, of course, there's persistence. And I don't mean the kind where, did you get my last message and that type of persistence, but it's just emailing them, waiting to see if they respond. If they don't respond, send another friendly note about something else that the company's doing. It seems like those companies, when they're laser targeted on the right journalists, are the ones that have the biggest bang for the buck. Do you disagree or agree, Lara?
I have a tracker installed on my email, so I can tell who's read my emails. And if somebody's read it and hasn't responded within 24 hours or 48 hours, I pretty much write them off. I'm not the type that's going to really hassle and bug a journalist ever. And that's paid off in the end, and they don't spam.
So what tracker do you use?
But I use Mail Tracker, and it's pretty intuitive. It's simple, and
it's for
so I can tell if somebody's
right?
it's for Gmail. I can tell if somebody's read my emails.
Yeah.
Yes, where does it?
So,
there are plenty of others.
There's lots
as well.
of them. Yeah, there's a ton of them. So I think the way to be successful in dealing with journalists and getting coverage, if you're a PR person, if you're a startup, is respect your journalists, respect them, and respect their time. They're much more apt to listen to what you have to say. That has paid off in my relationships with journalists. I have a friend, her name is Carmel, and she worked for Pando Daily, and then she moved to a bunch of other ones, and she actually is on hiatus now. But she was getting so many emails during the day. She'd get probably 300 or 400 emails a day with pitches. So she said, put all of your pitches in bold caps and that's in the subject line, so it stands out, so I know that it's you. Those things, and that just comes from treating people with respect and value, respecting their time and not hassling them.
Is anyone else alarmed at how much of this is basic human communication?
I am.
Most normal
it's embarrassing. I'm with you.
I mean, like actual human beings work like this. It's just the PR industry that has become such a swill of turds that has failed to actually connect with the human race. Because everyone else I talk to about what I do in my life, and to answer the question in my case, first of all, learn to actually talk like the humans that exist on this planet. And if you can't, just don't talk to them. Just disappear forever. I'm not suggesting you die. Just don't talk.
Well, this
and it's
a
just
comment for Ed and Matt. So let me play, because I played both sides of the fence here. Journalists are pretty arrogant, don't you think? And,
No.
No, never.
I was a journalist for 7 years.
It's not just PR. It's not just PR. I mean, one of my favorite stories to tell is I sat on the panel. I was invited by a major hotel brand to come and speak to all of their PR folks. And the other panelists comprised a couple of other writers and a very, we'll say, well-known local Bay Area travel editor. This guy, who it seems many fear or something, sat up in front of the room. Again, they were hosting us. They wanted to learn from us. And he barked at the people in the room, don't ever call me. Don't ever email me if you want an immediate response. And don't ever expect me to respond at all. And, again, back to what you said, Ed, I mean, it's all about human decency. I mean, we're all doing our jobs, right? And if someone can do their job better, I'm either not going to respond, if I don't have something nice to say, I'm not going to say it, or I'm going to take the time to do something like this, or pull somebody aside and say, you know what, hey, listen, you might want to correct that database. It turns out that I've told Cision that about 6 times. No one's corrected it. So it's like, hey.
Cision are grifters. PR News
it really does come down to human decency. Just don't be a dick.
Well, you know what? I actually don't think journalists are that arrogant. I think in that situation, sure, probably shouldn't have got up and yelled at people, but I think he's completely right. You know what? And that sounds like desperation and anger versus arrogance. Arrogance, yes, there are arrogant journalists, but there are ones where PR people take, this isn't an attack on you, Matt, it's just from what I've seen. Take Peter Bright from Ars Technica, for example. I've heard PR people say, Peter's arrogant. Those people, I tell them to go F themselves. Like, I really do. That's my message to you. If you think Peter's lovely, but you know what? Most PR people who come to him have not only just a lack of knowledge about Ars Technica as a website, but not just a lack of knowledge about what he writes about, but straight up don't understand their own subject matter. They don't know IT from their arsehole. And I mean, they come to him and they go, blah, 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 all this nonsense. It doesn't apply. That doesn't make sense. They don't know anything. PR people are, by and large, not trying to learn about their industries. They don't know travel, tech, whatever. I work with game clients. I work with tech clients. I can, without a doubt, tell you I definitely, and this is me being arrogant because I know I'm correct based on the very small sample I've looked at. So, but most PR people I run into, I've spoken to people who work internally at giant chipset makers who didn't know AMD, what MMX was, basic history of chipsets, and that was their company. Or I've gone with gaming clients, and what was the last game you played? It's like, what the hell are you doing? If you're in PR, in the subject matter, I can understand if you're an agent, one of those small shop agencies. When I started out, I was on like a knee replacement company, an ad tech company, an investment company. You can't know all things about all things. But if you want to know what you specifically need to get your startup covered, if you're just a startup, know the journalist, talk to the journalist, speak to the journalist, 120 words, does this. I don't actually think a big story is necessary, though you might need to adjust it to say, all right, this is what's important. This is why it's important to the world if it's not inherently obvious. I work with the thing called the Lily flying camera. And it was a time when everyone was talking about drones. People still talking about drones. And I got a few hundred pieces of coverage. And the whole thing I did there was I worked out what was actually going to be important. One, that they would be cynical it existed. So I got Antoine, the co-founder, go outside, throw the bloody thing in the air, take a really shaky camera video so it was obvious it was real. More importantly, the thing that would impress people wasn't that this thing could fly and take video. It was that A, it could follow you, and B, you could throw it in the air and it just started flying. That worked. That wasn't if some idiot PR firm had spammed out flying camera that follows you, they probably wouldn't have got the results.
Right.
So again, and these startups with PR agencies and these startups in general, Matt, going back to your example of the person harassing you, that's desperation. That's pressure they have, internalized or investor or just industry. That's why they're doing that. And to me, that is inherently a problem in PR. Also, PR is just so cheap to do for the PR agency. It's so high margin. I just don't think in most cases they give a crap. I don't think they care.
Well,
Lara, you got to back up your profession there.
Yeah, I know, right?
I don't. I specifically attack my profession every day.
That's why I wanted Ed to be with me too, because I agree with Ed.
You seem fine.
Yeah, so thank you. I think
if you know Carmel.
If you are a startup and you're doing your own PR also, don't ever turn down an opportunity. Nope. I've had clients who have just launched and, are getting, 10 site visitors a day and saying, oh, I need you to help do PR. And then they're saying that they won't do certain interviews that I get for them. And I'm like, dude, you're not. I mean, I used to call it the Oprah effect. Can't really do that anymore, but yeah, you're not as big of a deal as you think you are. Go to this radio show that has 5,000 listeners. And if anything, look at it as practice for the big ones.
Here's a question for you then, which is kind of related to this. In the new business process for you guys, do you not vet this out? Because I found this problem dropped remarkably when I went into every new business thing and just basically said, you're not going to be here. You're not going to be here. You're not going to be here. And if they go, why not? Then usually I don't work with them because I'm right. In one very rare case, I had someone go, what about if I have this? I went, yeah, that might work actually.
Yeah.
It was actually, I think it was Forbes and the guy was invested in by John Legend, and John Legend would get on the phone.
Right.
And I went, yeah, that might do it.
Right. Yeah. I do that. I do. But, it's saying things. And then when it comes to actually happening sometimes with clients, it's just something I've noticed. And since we're giving tips, not for PR people, but for startups that don't have PR people, if you're doing your own PR, don't turn down anything. Do it all. Do everything. Talk to your mailman. Talk to everyone. To get the word out there. You have to. You're going to get lost in the shuffle if you don't.
But I think the bigger takeaway here, again, and thanks, Lara, for bringing it back. The bigger takeaway here is just don't be a dick. And I give talks to the other side, to journalists all the time about, how to become a better freelancer. And, people expect me to go in there and talk about grammar and construction and the art of writing. And really, I spend most of the time just talking about being nice and what it means to make an editor's life easier. Yeah. And, we can talk about not pestering and getting your information right in terms of PR and startups. But really, at the end of the day, once you have a journalist's attention, just be nice. You know, I work with a gal who does PR out of Chicago, and she just wrote a great blog post based upon an interview that I did for I don't know, some like how to pitch people or something like that. Anyway, I'll get the link and I'll share it with you guys. But one of the things she shared in her post was that the first thing she always says when she actually calls a journalist, whether it's been prearranged or not, is, hey, are you on deadline? Is this a good time to talk? Mm-hmm. Something that simple can make the difference between pissing off a journalist enough to have that person never want to work with you again, or having that person remember that you are the considerate publicist who actually asks if now is a good time.
Right. And not even that, but get back to people in a timely manner. I try to respond within an hour, depending on if I'm at the gym or whatever I'm doing. I try to respond to people within an hour, especially journalists, especially people that want to cover my clients. I respond immediately. I don't want to leave them hanging, and I don't want them to have to, struggle to find somebody if they're writing a story and not know if we're going to show up. So just have that common courtesy, and they're, doing their job, but they're also giving you very valuable. There's a dollar amount that can be attached to earned PR, and they're doing it because it's their job. So get back to them.
I just don't know why anyone's calling anyone. I haven't cold called a journalist.
I
haven't cold called a journalist. And I even mean this as far as journalists I know super well, have a perfect story for them, have something I have literally not called a journalist. One guy at Inc., I think, is the only one I've ever truly cold called in the last
I don't
5 years.
Have either. I've called producers at TV stations to get emails.
Right.
And said, hey, can I get your email really quick? I have a pitch for you. But I don't know if I've ever got on the phone with a journalist and pitched a story.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I agree with Ed.
I did it in my first year. I'm not gonna lie. My first year I mail merch. First year I learned all the terrible things.
Yeah.
I did the terrible things. I was a war criminal.
Matt,
you're reformed. But let me ask Matt and Ed this question. A lot of companies, let's say startups, like to write the story and then hand it over to journalists because they say, it'll make it easier for the journalists to kind of run the story that they want. Is that a good practice or a bad practice?
I think that's hilariously bad.
Go first.
It's hilariously bad, and I've seen it like 3 times, and I think it's the funniest thing. And I offered to publish it sometimes, and every time I'm like, sure, I'll do it. And I create a blogspot account with something horrible as the name, and I think about doing it. I don't do it every time.
Yeah,
I delete the email. I block the person. I'm evil, but not that evil. But I want to.
Yeah, just put it out there and anywhere. Like a porn site or something.
I make clear. I make clear that that what they're sending me is not going to be published in its in the form they're sending it. But I don't mind it because a lot of times it gives me a sense of the voice that I'm assuming the startup wants to use when expressing itself. And I mean, I'm going to use my own voice or the voice of the publication to which I'm contributing. But sometimes getting a good understanding of the voice a company wants to use when telling its own story can actually help make the story that you write a little bit better. Right. Better informed. So
are you talking about literally an article attached, like they have written the article for you?
Are we talking about press releases or actually written articles?
So a lot of journalists can ask, and I'm not saying Ed and Matt, you do this. They'll ask you to write the story, and then they'll take that story and they'll modify it, put it in their own voice. I've seen this a lot. So that's what I'm talking about, not a press release that you then turn into a story.
So wait, you're saying that they asked to see the article Matt or someone else has written, and then they ask to read it?
They'll write the article, Ed, and then
that's illegal. First of all, that's I believe FCC or FTC.
Yeah, are they contributors? Really Mark, are you thinking of contributors or actual journalists like Matt?
No, actual journalists have asked for an article to be written. Not too many. It's usually the other way around. It's usually the startup thinking that the journalists will just print the article if they send them. But I've seen both.
No,
has to be
I
the
mean, I see. I
stupidest
know
thing
what
I've
Mark's
ever
talking
heard.
about.
Yeah.
It happens to me probably once a month where someone will say, "Oh, we wrote this story. Why don't you just publish this?"
Right.
Again, the answer is, well, no, but thanks. I'll read what you wrote, and that can become part of my research.
Oh my god! I wish I got more. I published them.
We can
I
forward them
published
in.
them. I published
Everybody
them.
send that to Ed. Send
Yeah,
the
please
Ed
give
article.
them to me.
Someone-
I will replace every startup name with a different member of the Wu-Tang Clan and publish.
There we go. I love it. All right. Next question. What are the best PR campaigns that you guys have seen overall, whether you were a part of it or not a part of it?
When you say campaign, are you talking about sort of a formal campaign with a hashtag, or are you talking about like, hey, what are some good pitches you received?
Go with good pitches you received, Matt.
Okay.
I'm interested to hear. I don't know where he is. I don't know where
Mark is. Yeah.
I'll step in.
Thanks, Lara. The best pitch I've received in this calendar year was a pitch on behalf of the Trust for Public Land, which is a nonprofit organization that sort of sets aside public space in all over the country. And they were one of the key funding units on a new trail in Chicago. And the publicist researched me. She researched my interests. She knew that when I write about adventure travel, I write about sort of offbeat adventure travel that is accessible to many, instead of these, these kinds of hikes that you do, Lara, up in the Himalayas or what have you. Mm-hmm. And it was such a well-researched and well-crafted pitch that as soon as I finished reading her email, I knew that I was going to write about it for somebody. I just didn't know who at the time, and it ended up becoming a Wall Street Journal article in the travel section. And it was clear she had we talked about it afterwards, and she and I are friends now, but she said she spent about a half day researching me and my markets and what I like to write about, and it was clear. It shone through. And the result was a hit for her in the Wall Street Journal.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And what was the pitch? What was the original pitch?
The pitch was just, hey, this new trail is opening. TPL, Trust for Public Land, was super involved in making this thing happen. I'd love to tell you more about this. Come out and see it. And I can connect you with some of the people who were involved in purchasing the land and in helping to string this thing together and rehabilitate. It was an old train track that basically was converted into a pedestrian thoroughfare. And it was just, she dotted every I, she crossed every T. And, I had to do all the legwork, went out there completely paid for myself and all that, but I had to do the research, but she made it very clear that she would help me get in front of everybody I needed to get in front of, and introduce me to anybody I needed to meet, and she did just that, and she made the story better. So in that case, it was PR at its finest.
Yeah, I think for me, Mark, that the best one that I've seen is the one that we worked on for Money Tips with the. That was covered on Yahoo. It made the homepage of Yahoo, and you wrote about it on Forbes afterwards. It got 5 million views and a huge amount of people logging on and checking out their site. But
there was a lot of prep.
5 million views.
Yeah,
5 million.
5 million.
Views. Probably more now. But if we describe the process to you, there were a lot of influential people involved in creating that and distributing that and socializing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge project. So that's why when I see startups that say, hey, I want that kind of coverage, like, man, you have to work for it. Stuff like that. It's not just going to happen. So that was one of the best ones that I've worked on. I mentioned Star Robots. That was an amazing one because it was such a good story. I mean, the story just pretty much wrote itself. I wanted to give another tip too for startups that are doing their own PR and think that they have something really interesting. Try to get an exclusive. You're much more apt to get coverage if you offer an exclusive. Just in my experience, every time I've offered an exclusive, it's been picked up. So that's going back to the other question, but whatever you do different, offer an exclusive with it.
What about you, Ed? What are the best pitches you've seen?
I'm not going to talk about my own successes because I just can't do it. But I'll tell you about the best practices of the ones I've seen succeed for me without being specific to the client. If a client is willing to go to New York and San Francisco with a product that is very visual, very accessible, and is new, that's the one thing that people keep getting wrong. Kickstarter, Indiegogo used to be 40% of our business. I dropped it to 5% by the end of the year. I'd rather not take the money. I think half of them are grifters. But anyways, the ones that have succeeded there the most is you have them there with the unit. You let the journalist play with it. However, there are many people who have succeeded with those I've seen, frankly, just by having a product that's new and it just being the right time, even though they've not had a real product. So I answer this by saying the best ones I've seen have either been completely stupid, so they've just succeeded by just being an absolute stupid fest, like Yo. I saw Yo and their agency proudly talking about winning an award for the Yo campaign, which I put up there. It's like, I did poopsie in the right place this morning. And they got that. And we go back to Matt's point about the PR person who was like, that he or she only wanted positive press. They clearly were just like, it's stupid. Look at the stupid thing. And that is the cynical truth about PR. It's either really impressive, got a celebrity, or it's completely like just something that blows you away. All right, I'll bring up the one client, Altwork. Altwork is this crazy chair that you can compute in zero gravity and the things like this. The amount of coverage we've got for that is insane, partly because we did the really simple thing of getting people to actually bloody use it. Nobody using that chair sits there and has this reaction of like, well, that was fun. Well, like, that was mediocre. Everyone has the same, wow, this is awesome. Like, wow, this is crazy. And that's kind of square pegs, square holes. In that case, it's less about, I hate the term PR campaign in general, not attacking you for using it. I'm just like, the term doesn't really mean anything anymore. Mm-hmm. I'd argue because unless you're talking about something with a big ad buy behind it, which is not PR, big website build, which is not PR, big.
I think how people use PR campaign is multiple outlets that you're going to and showing your product, right? It's not
that just sounds like pitching to me. And that's the thing. It's the best ones that succeed are usually right person, right product. Mm-hmm. And crap, fine. I will name clients. Backblaze. I work with them on B2, which is like a Google, Amazon Web Services competitor. Very simple line notes. We did the announcement in September and the launch yesterday, and we succeeded. TechCrunch, VentureBeat, so on and so forth, and Inc. and some others, and a beautiful Forbes story actually. And the reason that worked was those were people who wrote about these things who would notice that it was cheaper than the others. And also there was an interesting story about them building their own storage. I know how that works, so I talked about it in a very simple bloody way. And that's really it. And the reason they seem so cynical and just kind of kvetching about it is because it doesn't seem that impressive to me.
Yeah.
And I find it hard to get excited when I see awards for best PR campaigns. I think PR News Online and PR Week need to just shut down in general, but shut down their awards for sure.
I like some of the writers for them now.
For PR Week?
He used to write for Media Bistro. And now
Bistro's good. I never met.
He's
I said PR Week.
No, it's PR something.
News.
He's a really nice guy. Yeah, I've worked with him.
Good friend.
Yeah, he's a good guy. So
I mean, the whole notion of awards for PR are kind of silly to me. It's like in the world of PR, isn't the best award
coverage
and sick clips and I don't know, section front stuff in the Times or segment lead on the Today Show. I mean, that's the award.
Give them a reward for taking something boring or new and getting actual coverage for it. Yeah. Seriously, that's
a good award. Actually, we ought to do that, Laura.
What's that?
We ought to do that.
I know.
That's a fair reward. That's a fair.
I don't take clients that bore me anymore, though.
That's a hard one, though, right? That's really a hard one to cover. All right, so let's go on to the next question. We only have 10 minutes left. How if you're a startup, how do you decide? There's two questions here. How do you decide whether to hire an outside PR firm or keep it internal? And then how do you determine how much money to spend so that there's an ROI? Or should you just forget about the ROI out of the gate? Very interested in your guys' opinion on this.
I can
Lara, let's start with you. Yeah.
You want with me?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's start with you.
So, you hire a PR person, and I don't even really do PR per se. I do media relations. I get the stories out there. I'm not sitting in my office, coming up and designing in a whole ad. Like so many PR companies.
That's not PR.
It's just bullshit. It's just bullshit with so many PR companies. And I tell people that I am in PR and they're like, oh, I run a social media. I also have a public relations company. And so now I call myself media relations. That's what I do. I sit there and I pitch. I get your story out there.
That's PR. That's really all PR is.
It's yeah. If you don't know how to get your story out there, hire somebody to do it for you.
Well, what do you pay, Lara? What do you have to pay a company?
I know PR companies that charge, $12,000 retainer for the month. Right? I don't. I'm not. Ed does. I don't. Without getting into, how much money I make, I look at it as I don't want to make $1 million a year. I don't want to work more than I don't want to work more than 40 hours a week, and
that's all I do.
Have employees, so I'm cheaper. And it's just me, and I keep my client base really small. You can go, and people like me that are really experienced you can get us for fairly cheap, or you can go to some of the bigger ones. Adds up probably a little bit more, and he has employees and people working for him too.
Yeah, but Lara, how do you determine what your value is? I mean, how do
I determine what my value is?
Well, I mean,
when I have more clients than I can take on, so I just raise my price.
Yeah, but let's say they're spending $12,000 a month with Ed. That's what he charges.
Right.
How does a startup determine whether that money is well served versus buying ads?
This is the eternal problem that PR has, is showing your value. I try to do that with my clients by saying, here are placements, and here's links back to your site, and here's, I do a lot of product PR, so it's very, very they know. I mean, they know if it's working or not just by product being sold. Ed, I'll let you take it away from there. Determine value.
Generally, if you are a CEO who has time to do PR for your startup and can afford it, you're a crappy CEO.
Yep.
That's really just it. If you have that time to run a company and also do the media relations, then you probably suck. Really, ROI is media relations is one of the few ways of doing it. Sometimes you can base it off of click-throughs if you really want to. Sometimes you can base it on SEO, sites that have high domain authority. I personally think that's a bit wanky, but some people like it. Generally, I base it on actual coverage that I expect to get. And we've had it. There are sometimes other KPIs, answering the question from dark marketing, which I read as dank marketing at first, which is vastly different. But some clients are like, we want to meet 2 journalists a month. We want to continue getting these introductions. And that works because sometimes these journalists meet the person and they're like, oh, shit, that person's actually perfect. Yeah, I'm going to write a story. That just happened with me. Client went to New York and he met with like 5 journos, and I think 2 are going to write something up. Pretty good conversion rate for a few hours of his time and many more of mine.
Yeah, and Aaron, to answer Aaron with dark marketing's question too, I've never had a client say, I need you to show me the dollar value of these. I've never had that happen.
Me neither.
Ever. So no, they don't.
I think
that's client expectations too. You have
Matt,
to set
any
those
thoughts?
expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I feel like I'm going to go in a completely different direction here. Obviously you can hire somebody if you want to, but I think if you can have someone on your staff, maybe it's your CMO, maybe it's someone who you bring in-house specifically to cultivate relationships. For me on the journalism side, PR is all about relationships. Right now I'm in the box here. right next to Lara. And that's a perfect example. We worked together on a poker story 10 years ago. And since then, we've probably done, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 pieces, maybe even more.
Yeah. Concerts, hang out.
We have a relationship. We developed a relationship. And you can't put a dollar figure on something like that. Right. So whereas if a startup asked Lara or Ed, hey, listen, I need you to quantify this. I need you to give me a dollar figure. I need you to give me ROI. I need you to give me some KPIs. You could do that if push comes to shove on an account where you're bringing in a third party for a sole purpose, which is guerrilla public relations, essentially. Mm-hmm. But if you have someone on your team and you charge that person with cultivating relationships, you keep the bigger picture in mind, all of a sudden it becomes less about public relations and more about spreading the message, more about marketing with a capital M. And ultimately that's PR at its best. Now, when you're a startup, you tend not to think about it that way. But the reality is that whether you're a startup or you're a multi-million-dollar company, at the end of the day, relationships are going to drive the coverage. So why not start building them from the beginning?
Right. I agree. And I agree with both of you. I agree with Ed. A CEO should never be doing his own PR for the company. He's a shitty CEO or a shitty PR person, but never a CEO. But if you have somebody in marketing that can go out and cultivate those relationships, you don't need a PR company.
And this isn't my services. I disagree only because I've done in-house. And the thing that I've found is actually having multiple clients helps you keep in touch with the reporters.
That's true. I mean, there's
multiple touch points really does help.
Yeah.
Why can't you just keep in touch? Why can't you cultivate relationships with reporters independently? I mean, I do.
Because, you're a reporter though, but also
I was saying with editors. But I mean, the tables for me are with editors. I mean, I
you can do it. It's just easier. I found this is my experience from having done both.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand how it works, but I think it also works the other way too. And if you've got a limited budget, maybe spend it on getting the company where it needs to be instead of worrying about getting the word out.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Looks like Mark is out again.
He just hates me.
I know. I think that was the last question.
Do we need to wrap this on our own?
We do. I have 2 things. First of all, I'm working out of the amazing Tahoe Mountain Lab co-working space in South Lake Tahoe. And they're not a client or anything. They're just amazing, and they're my friends. And they wanted to offer a free co-working day to the audience. So if you guys ever come to South Lake Tahoe and you want to co-work, let me know. We'll get some coffee and we can hang out here at the co-working space for free. And then the other thing is my climbing partner, he just turned 40. He's turned 40 today. So we are headed to Nepal in April again. And I wanted to say happy birthday, Zach. Happy 40th. So
I'd like to thank
those are my 2 things.
I'd like to thank Chris and Kevin, my 2 members of my staff who are lying in the feed. We do not charge 0, Kevin, but more than happy to drop your salary to that.
Is that who is your employee that wrote that? That's so funny.
I won't do that, right. Kevin. I love you, Kevin.
Right. 0.
In an inappropriate manner.
Hey, and I just want to shout out for those folks who want to learn more about me, check me out at whalehead.com. That's whale like the animal, head like the body part.com. You can also read my family travel blog at wanderingpod.com. You guys can see the whale theme there. I like whales, and I really enjoyed being a part of today. So, Mark, if you can hear us,
thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mark.